now. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Azhar. I'm the founder of the Legal Mile. I'm joined with Raja, who's also the founder of CVLinks, co-founder of CVLinks. And so today's event is what it takes to be an entrepreneurial lawyer with Robert Flint, and we kind of want to explore what his career motivations and the career path he took, how he chose this career path, kind of and see where it goes. And so, Legal Mile, we are dedicated to supporting your journey into a legal career. And so far, what we've got tomorrow, we have an event actually. So it's commercial awareness deep dives, but that's with a different partnership. So the starting line, where we kind of talk more about commercial awareness. So apart from talking about a legal career, we talk about what's going on in the markets and how we can link it to applications, and even in the future, when we start our legal careers, how we can kind of observe these trends. And next Wednesday, the Wednesday after, so 31st March, we kind of will be speaking to a trainee solicitor, a future trainee solicitor at least, who's done a vacation scheme and converted it into a training contract. So that will kind of we'll kind of ask her questions about how you can turn your vacation scheme into a training contract. And the following month, April, we have a newsletter coming out. So look out for that. Talk about the commercial events that are going on, and also yeah, that's about it from the Legal Mile. So Raja, would you like to talk more about CVLinks and yeah, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Azza, for the introduction. So I'm the founder of CVLinks. My co-founder James isn't here at the moment, but me and him started the CVLinks as a way to link students, law graduates, and just people who are interested in law with internships. In the beginning, we were offering unpaid internships, but this slowly transformed into paid opportunities as well. So right now, at the moment, full disclosure, we're not operating any internships at the moment. However, we are still running CVLinks as a way to prepare people for internships or for legal work experience, and we can give some tips in regards to that as well. And this is actually our first event, so with Robert. So hopefully this is the start of something new, and hopefully we can have more events with the Legal Mile, and also with great guests and great speakers such as Robert. And I'm really excited to hear what he has to say, and I'm sure it'll be great it'll be a great experience for you guys as well. So I guess I'll start really with a question for Robert. So we've introduced ourselves. Robert, could you introduce yourself and share a bit about your background if possible?
Yeah, well, thanks, Roger. You've set me up for a fall there, haven't you, being a good speaker, but let's see how we go. So I grew up in Rutland, so not too far from you guys, and I went to school there, and then also went to university, and then started studying history, and then worked in London in politics, and politics was sort of always what I wanted to do, I suppose. And then when starting working in politics, it was always sort of how do you make a career out of that? You don't really. So I started studying law at night school at BPP in London, and then applied for a training contract that had a firm that had a sort of political or parliamentary agency, which was sort of a good segue into the legal field, because I could talk about a sector with some knowledge and detail that I wasn't able to do in terms of sort of commercial law. So I trained at that firm, qualified into that firm, into the corporate team, having sort of continued to the sort of drift towards commercial business side of things, and then left that firm with the intention of going to France to learn French and have a sort of bit of a sabbatical. My other half is French. And while there, I set up a consultancy business that blended politics and law, so helping businesses that needed to respond to technical consultations. So having an eye on the political side of things, but also the technical detail of the laws that they were trying to change. While doing that, and while still in France, I was headhunted by Carbon Law Partners to become a partner in their, well, as a corporate commercial partner, which I did for 3 years. And at the end of last year, as in literally the end of last year, 31st December, was my last day, and I'm now working on Adviserly, which is a network of legal and accounting firms around the world to provide legal and accounting advice to smaller businesses and small firms. That was something I needed when I was in practice, and something I needed when I was setting up my business that was operating in France, but for UK clients. So I guess that's me in a nutshell. Don't know how interesting that is, how useful that is, but what do you want to do now?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. You mentioned that you came from a political background as such. You had an interest in politics, but you felt as though, obviously, you know, doing a politics degree, there's not many, like, it's not a vocational degree. You can't really you can't become an MP after you study your politics, right?
Yeah.
So what was the I guess your biggest challenge, because you come from an unconventional background? So what was the biggest challenge when, you know, in the beginning stages, so at the training contract stage, into getting into a legal profession? What was the biggest challenge, you would say?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So unconventional in some ways, but in other ways, depressingly conventional. So sort of white middle class. Went to decent school, went to decent university, and so had everything in my favour, and still struggled with essentially the language of law, the language of the businesses that operate in this area. So the language of commerce, which I didn't really know very much about. So I think that was one of the things. I had a language of politics, a language of the technical language of law, but not sort of how firms operated. And actually, when you're going to an interview, you need to know how firms operate on a day-to-day basis. You need to know the sorts of things that are going to come up, the context, the competitors, the technology, some of the likely clients, all of that sort of thing. And you can learn that you can learn it sort of artificially by looking at the firm's website and that sort of thing, trying to do a bit of due diligence on the firm. But you do need more than that as well. And so I think the only reason I was successful in getting a training contract was because I did have the language of parliamentary law. So there was a really easy fit. There was a really natural explanation for why I wanted to go to this particular firm. And I spoke that particular language fluently. And then only when I was at the firm did I then learn the language of how to talk about law and talk about business relationships in a way that was then convincing and genuine. Yeah, that was my biggest challenge. I didn't have people to talk to, I suppose. So all of my friends and family, pretty much doctors, farmers, academics, politicians, none of them were really lawyers. So none of them were in business. So that would have been really helpful, and that was lacking. But equally, you kind of, everyone will have gaps, and it's trying to identify what the gaps in your knowledge are, and then filling them in the best way that you can, ideally with real work experience or training or what have you, but just being honest with yourself about what you don't know.
Yeah, that's really the good tips there. And when it comes to researching the law firm, we get told repeatedly, you know, on blogs and YouTube videos, you know, you have to research the law firm in order to get a training contract. But with your experience applying for a training contract, were they sort of you know, back then, were they sort of approaching someone and then they could give you more information about what the law firm does, or was it a case of just essentially looking at a website, doing, like you said, due diligence, or did you have a list of law firms already that you were interested in?
So my approach, I wouldn't recommend to anyone, which was I didn't go and talk to anyone at any of the law firms. I didn't properly do my research as thoroughly as I should have done, because proper research should be about going and talking to people at the firms beforehand. So you do know the sort of just all the small things that, potentially even bits of gossip, things you hear on the grapevine about what tensions between departments. You don't even bring that up at the interview, but it helps you, your emphasis when you're answering questions. You sort of have a bit more of an instinct about where to go and what avenues to pursue. So I did none of that. So I didn't know that I should have done. So I applied to 4 firms that all had a parliamentary link or a public law link of some kind, so that I would be able to have those sorts of conversations and say that this is why I've chosen your firm. There is a reason, in particular your firm rather than the bigger firms. And so that one of the consequences was the firms I applied for were not the larger firms. They were sort of smaller city firms, because the large firms don't really bother with parliamentary work, and there are very few parliamentary agents. It's an incredibly niche area of work. So I looked on the websites about all of these firms, and I had to fill in those horrible forms, which in my view just proved to the world how good you are at filling in forms, rather than actually how good a fit you are for the firm. But yeah, so filled in those forms. I didn't hear back at all from 3 of them, and then got an interview, and then second interview, and then I think at that stage they were only doing 2 interviews, so I had quite an easy ride in that sense. And so basically went all the way with one firm and heard nothing from the other 3. But my story could be so different, because if I hadn't got that 4th firm, then I don't know, maybe I would have given up the next year or done something else. I don't know.
Interesting. And you said you mentioned about your political background. Was it your role that you were in politics with? How would you best describe it as? Because it's something which when you mention it, obviously working in politics can mean different things. You could be a secretary to a mayor, you could be a campaigner, you could do a secretarial job. So what was it that what sort of duties were you involved in, basically?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There are lots of different areas to be involved in politics. I was at what at the time was known as the Parliamentary Resources Unit, but has since been renamed, which was a unit of researchers that provided policy advice to senior shadow ministers and MPs. So you would research a topic ahead of parliamentary questions. You would provide briefings for constituency events, anything that was technically useful for them that wasn't strictly political. So I was initially on the health team, because that was an interesting segue in itself. So I didn't have a health background, but because I had all of my friends and family were in medicine in some way, shape, or form, that meant that I could talk that language, and had more of an instinct for it. So that was my way in at that stage. So it highlights the importance of being able to talk the talk. And then while I was there, I then segued into the justice team, and that was when I was starting my training contract. So my law school. So and then after about a year and a half of that, I think I then moved to work for an MP directly in their office, who actually was my local MP.
Nice. It all comes together at some point.
Yeah.
Really good. And one question, so another question I had was, you mentioned you had a consultancy business, essentially, Legis Consultations, I believe, is it? And
Yeah.
and you said you're working in France, I believe, you were setting up the business there. So so that transition between law, sorry, you started in politics, then to law, then to the business world. What was that transition like, and what inspired you to make that transition?
Yeah, so I mean, all of the things that I've done have involved a combination of law, politics, and business. So it's just a sort of shift of emphasis rather than a transition as such. So why did I shift the emphasis from law? So I mean, it wasn't really the aim actually to start a business. It was an aim to have a bit of time off, go to France, learn French, and that was a great year. And I'm pleased I did it, particularly given the situation we're in now. But while I was there, my previous firm asked me to do some work for one of their clients, and that was ideal because I knew them and they knew me, and it was the gap between law and politics. And then from that idea, where essentially I had been given work that I for a market I didn't know existed, I then started a business just in the background while doing that, and it worked quite well. So that was quite nice to find that out, but it wasn't planned. And then being invited to join Carbon was also not planned. And so the thing that has been planned is leaving Carbon to become an entrepreneur. But equally, I think all throughout having your own legal practice, you are acting as an entrepreneur. You're founding a practice, you're managing your clients, you're looking at the bottom line. So it's not all that different. It's just a shift of emphasis.
Yeah, I think I really like that phrase you use, a shift of emphasis, because the transition is more like I see that as more of a all-encompassing thing, whereas a shift of emphasis, it's something which is perhaps you can describe it as momentary, because your emphasis can shift again, and I think that flexibility is really important, I guess, in law, because you'll change from. I mean, if COVID has taught us anything as lawyers, is that then there's an area of law that may not be needed as much in the future. And if this has taught us anything, is that to be flexible. So yeah, that's a really good point you mentioned there. Now, when it comes to legis consultations, and hopefully, do correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, by the way. But
everyone pronounces it differently, so I don't.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the things I learned. Pick a name that people can actually say.
Yeah. I mean, so when it comes to legis consultations, what was the business like, and what was the experience like in France?
It was good. So, I mean, all the clients were in the UK, so I'd come to the UK to talk to people, and I mean, there would be remote calls, but a lot of it was face-to-face meetings in London and what have you. So it was good. I mean, clients would pay me to do things that I didn't think were that difficult, and I could do it when I wanted. The liability was basically non-existent because it was responding to government consultations, rather than, if you're a lawyer, you're constantly at risk of, if you make a mistake, that can cause a real problem. And I got to look at really interesting topics. So the frontier of politics and law is a really interesting space, because you've got that the law is changing, and so you're looking at the technical side of the law, and then also why the law is the way it currently is, and why the law should be or should not be different. So one of the big areas that I was looking at was leasehold and common hold. So the firm that I had trained at was a big, still is a big property firm. So I had a lot of knowledge on how leasehold works and the issues around leasehold. So I was able to use that as a good way of advising clients on the changes that are being proposed about leasehold, and about the introduction of common hold, or the reinvigoration of common hold is the language. So that was great, really interesting, the sort of philosophy behind the changes, and the practical impact that the law currently has, and the practical impact that the change in the law will have, is actually in some ways a lot more interesting than just pure politics, where most of that is people, it's personalities, and people who get on and how much they like each other, and you know, who voted for Boris Johnson because he was the right person for the job, or because they just thought he was quite funny. It's not that's not interesting really, because it's not there's no detail to it. It's just, you know, it's all a bit of fluff. Whereas actually getting down to the nitty gritty of policy and the legal aspect of policy is interesting, because you can see how very specific changes cause very specific results.
Yeah, that I think that nature of politics being, you know, this sort of personality sort of contest, you know, who has the best personality, and you don't tend to, yeah, I agree with you, you don't tend to vote for the incoming prime minister because of the necessary, I mean, maybe some people do vote for their policies, manifesto, pledges, whatever, but I think more of it is, at least in the era of digital, it's mostly a personality contest. So I resonate with that, and I've done some campaigning, and I know how that feels like as well. And so I guess my next question will be now about what you're doing right now. So you've told us about your background, you told us about what you did in France. What are you doing right now? And I know you're the founder of Advisory, and if you could share more background on that, really, because in case, I'm sure people have heard of it before, but if you could tell more information about that, would be great.
I would say, I mean, it's what, 2 months old, 3 months old. The idea behind it was two problems. One, when practicing as a lawyer, always struggling to find decent and the same sort of standard of pricing and responsiveness in terms of lawyers and accountants overseas for my clients. It was just, if you didn't have a connection or someone to refer you someone in a jurisdiction, it was impossible to find. So you'd basically have to go to the more expensive option, because you needed to guarantee quality, and the more expensive option is often slower, more bureaucratic. They don't respond in the same way that the clients want. Clients often come to smaller firms, more dynamic firms, because that's the sort of service they want. And then as soon as you add an overseas entity that's much larger, you end up back into this slower, more expensive, less responsive world. And there are lots of great smaller firms around the world that aren't hooked up to each other. So realizing that, I was like, well, this should exist. I would find this really useful. And I imagine lots of other people in my position would as well. And indeed, lots of friends who have moved to other countries in Europe would also have found this useful when setting themselves up, so that you have access to an accountant or a lawyer that didn't charge the earth, but would speak good English and have connections in the UK as well. So I think that's the sort of gap I'm trying to fill. And at the moment, I'm very much going down the lean startup route. So I'm avoiding spending any money unless absolutely unavoidable. And the thing that, so basically I need to prove the idea, like test the assumptions that I have, and make sure that before I spend money, the business will fly. And I think I'm getting to the stage where I'm happy that the big assumptions are correct, and I can start putting a bit more money into it, which is sort of an exciting place to be. And yeah, looking forward to seeing where that goes. And the thing about it is, obviously, you never know, even now, even though I'm sort of reasonably happy, you never know whether it's actually going to work or not. So you've always got this sort of element of you know, will I just be wasting this year if at the end of this year it all collapses, or essentially I give up, which is what is, I think, happens to a lot of founders, because you get to a stage where you have to make some really big decisions about your life, and it's not just spending cash and time, it's the opportunity cost of the other things you could be doing but aren't doing because you're pursuing a dream. And actually, one of the things that I've learned, and one of the many things you mentioned before, and I don't know whether I'm preempting this as a question, but like in terms of the things I've wish I knew now, and sort of tips for starting lawyers and what have you, is don't compare yourself to other people. Don't hold yourself to other people's standards, your friends and your families. Just do what is interesting for you, and if you're interested in it, you'll be better at it, you'll enjoy it, and you'll be more successful. But don't do something because you think other people will rate you for it, or because you think that other people are doing it, so it must be a good idea. That's not necessarily true. So yeah, I don't know whether this will work, but I'm enjoying it, and now seems like a great time to be doing something that you enjoy, because of all of the extra stresses and strains that lockdown adds to just the business of living that none of us are really expecting.
Yeah, you did answer that question, so thanks for that. But yeah, no, I think the greatest thing about this period of our lives is that we're in this really big event that's happened. No one can avoid it, and if you could see as an opportunity, as you're suggesting, rather than just something that you have to deal with, then I think it could lead to endless possibilities. And a lot of our viewers today, and people who view this again, will be from a law student background, or maybe they're not they're non-law student, they want to get into law, or they're graduates and they feel as though they're too old to get into the legal profession. I know it sounds crazy, but there are some law graduates out there who are maybe in their late 20s or early 20s or whatever, but they still feel as though, because it's so competitive, they feel as though maybe I don't want to chance my luck by applying for trainee contracts because I might be seen as too old, or maybe it's a 21-year-old to get all the spotlight or whatever. For those people out there, what would you say about how important keeping in your chosen direction, how important that is, regardless of how old you are or what other constraints there are in your life?
Yeah, so I think law is often seen as a destination, and once you're there, you've reached the promised land. And I think that's partly because there are so many hurdles on the way to getting into a legal career, but it's actually not. I don't think once you're there, you're still looking around for other things that are interesting. And if you train at a firm, do you then go in-house, or do you segue into being a startup like I'm doing, or do you maybe go into politics or public affairs, or actually go into business properly, working in a sales role or something in a big company? That legal training is useful for pretty much everything, but it's only one aspect of a sort of rounded professional and commercial life. So if you have the commercial experience of a career prior to becoming a solicitor, that is really useful for when you are practicing as a solicitor. And so I talked earlier about the not knowing the language of commerce. If you have been working before, then you've got that. You've got the instinctive economics, the language of it that I didn't have, and that should be really useful. Some firms will value it more or less, but I think every firm values it really. So long as you're technically good enough when it comes to the law, that having that sort of background is only to your advantage. And the age thing, I don't think it really makes a difference these days. I think the only difference it might make, well, first of all, obviously they're not allowed to discriminate on age. Secondly, they want the extra experience that you can bring. The only thing that they might not want in someone who has more experience is the knowledge that when you become a trainee, you really are at the bottom of the pile. So, and that's actually something that I found difficult going from politics, where I was a senior advisor, to becoming a trainee, where I was, photocopy this piece of paper. It is a massive sort of gut punch, because suddenly you were making decisions before and now you're not, and it will be some time before you're making decisions. And stuff that should be easy, like writing a letter, is actually quite difficult because you have to use the technical phrases in the right order. And I found it really frustrating that I was so I had known what I was doing in my previous job, and now I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I think perhaps law firms are wary of that, because they know that transition is difficult. And you, as a trainee, you do have to be humble, and you have to be willing to learn. And in the worst case, if you're in one of the law firms that sort of whips you forward, which I wasn't, if you're in one of those firms, then you really do have to, you have to work really hard at potentially quite boring stuff, for no decision making, nothing of interest that you will get to do until much later in your career.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think that realization is so important. Having worked as a paralegal, and I know a few people in the school have worked as paralegals before, where you are literally. I think paralegals is the only exception to what you're saying about the bottom of the pile. They're probably below the trainee solicitor, level.
Actually, I not necessarily. Like, there is. Everyone has probably watched Suits, I guess, but the Meghan Markle character, the paralegal being more senior than the trainee equivalent, and there is a bit of that because paralegals at least know the ropes. They know the real basic things. They can save because, as you're finding out now, Roger, the learning how the computer systems work at a law firm, they're completely different to how you use a computer in a normal life, because of all of the extra restrictions and having to store everything in the right way. So paralegals know that, and trainees arrive thinking that they're hot stuff, and then they get a rude awakening when actually they can't do the real basic stuff.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true as well. I've seen that happen. By the way, when you're talking about trainee solicitors, sometimes thinking that they'll be given, executive making powers, on the first day, but that doesn't happen, like you said, until later on in life. So just wanted to ask, because there may be people from a business background or businesses that are listening to this recording, at least. What would you I guess what's your offer at Advisory? What offer are you making to those businesses?
So who am I pitching to?
To businesses that are maybe interested at Advisory right now, because you're in that really good space where you're a startup, but you are looking to expand. At least that's the impression I get.
Yeah. So the initial offer really is to small, medium-sized law firms and accounting firms. So either those that want to be on the network itself, or those that want access to the network, so to refer lawyers and accountants to the right people. So the pitches will find you a quality lawyer or accountant anywhere in the world through our existing referral network. There'll be the right sort of price point that you need. There'll be the right sort of cultural fit for the client. They'll speak English. Business will be easy with these people that we're going to find you. And if they're not, tell us about it, because the whole point of this sort of stage, it's all free at the moment. So the whole point of this stage is building the really quality network. And then once we're confident that we have a great network, then we can start charging commissions and potential subscriptions. So it's free. You get great referrals. There's no reason not to do it.
Yeah, great pitch. 10 out of 10. But yeah, thank you so much, by the way, for all the information you've shared, and I think a lot of people would benefit from that. So thank you so much. Now we're on to that section of the event where essentially people are more than happy to ask questions. So if you have any questions to ask Rob, take it away. There are no predetermined questions, so any questions you want to ask Rob, I'm more than happy. I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to answer them.
Great, super. So I guess I could just kick it off from this point forward.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, no worries, Russia. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay as per usual with these video calls, but we'll make do. Thank you so much, Robert, for taking the time today and coming to this event, speaking to everybody, sharing some of your experiences and knowledge, and hopefully the questions that I have will effectively try and be answered as best as possible. So my name is James. I'm currently a penultimate year law student with the University of Essex. My first question of the day essentially is, as a Canadian expat with several years of experience in the financial sector, how do city firms evaluate overseas work experience on their deciding factor to eventually decide to offer a vacation scheme or training contract?
I think they'd rate it very highly. So, well, certainly no worse than domestic work experience. What sort of work experience? Where in Canada? What sort of businesses?
I worked in banking. So I've held various roles in Montreal. I've lived in Toronto as well.
Yeah, well, there's certainly. I mean, the Canadian and UK systems are so integrated that it would be just like saying you worked at a bank in London or in the sector in London. And obviously there are the big Canadian firms have bases in London. So I worked at the office at McCarthy Tetro in the city as well. So the legal systems are so similar. The financial systems are so similar. The rules are. The governor of the Bank of England was from Canada. So it's
yes.
They're very well connected, and I mean, if anything, it's going to be an advantage because you can say you've got. I don't know whether you speak French, but you've got links. So you've got links to another jurisdiction. That's always handy, particularly if you go for a firm that is more international, and then you can say, I have this international experience. If you don't want to go for a firm that is more international, then it's still good because you can say you've got a wide range of experience, commercial, financial. I'd make the most of that in your applications, definitely.
Great, perfect. And my second question as well is, with a diverse CV spanning across the political and legal sector, what was the major deciding factor of your decision to leave your role as partner with Carbon Law and transition into essentially forming your own legal tech business and helping small and medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, it's interesting. What was the biggest issue? Well, I think it was an excitement for starting a proper business. It's something I'd always wanted to do. It's something I'd sort of half-heartedly done with my consultancy business. And like I said, Carbon had found me and I'd joined them and the practice was growing. So it was sort of, okay, at some point I do need to decide to do what I originally wanted to do. And I'd found an idea that I thought might fly. And so, yeah, it was now or never really. And I think lockdown probably encouraged me because life's too short, really. And I enjoyed being at Carbon. It's a great firm. It's a great way of practicing law to be run your own practice. You have a lot of freedom, but you also have the support of the larger sort of firm network. But also, of course, Carbon is sort of an inspiration for the idea that I've come up with, because it's sort of one layer of abstraction further on, because Carbon's a network of lawyers under the same firm SRA regulation and under the same insurance. And the advisory network is lots of different firms with different regulators, different insurance policies, and I bring them together. So it's sort of one layer abstraction above, but a similar idea. So the two are the two are linked, yeah, it's just really, it was interesting to see at Carbon how an entrepreneurial legal business can be run. So that perhaps if I'd been at a different firm, I wouldn't have done this, but then equally, I probably wouldn't have joined a different firm. So.
Oh, I see. So you effectively took the carpe diem approach and just decided to essentially seize the day and branch out into your own employment, which is great. So I guess you are the entrepreneurial lawyer, I guess.
Well, but also once you get to a certain stage of law, you can always go back. What I learned when I went to France, and again, these are things you learn when you're not. The incidental things you learn actually are often the most important things that you learn. So you're not planning on doing stuff, and then stuff becomes apparent. So as soon as I left Winkworth, the firm that I trained at, and then went to France, I was sort of inundated with people saying, "You're a corporate lawyer with 3 or 4 years PQE. Come and join us." And it was like, well, no, that wasn't my plan. So no, right now, but equally that's really interesting to know. And it's like once you get to a certain level, you can be reasonably confident and you can start taking more career risk, because it's not so much of a risk. It's just if you don't try it, you'll never know. So
great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I think I resonate with that analogy with having a safety net, essentially, you know, knowing that even if the startup experiment failed, you have something to fall back on. And I think that that's something which it only provides more air to your wings, essentially. So I think that's a great point there. Azar, do you have any questions from anyone who signed up?
Yeah, we do have a question from people who signed up, but I have kind of a personal question as well, because I'm a non-law student. I'm doing politics and social policy, and similarly to Robert, I guess I've got a kind of a political role lined up for me after graduation, but I really want to do law, so it's kind of I'm in two minds about it right now. So Robert, what kind of transferable skills would you say that, you know, from a political role to like a law role kind of thing, and also what are the different cultures if you're working in politics versus working in like a law firm?
Yes, there's lots of differences. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that many people of my generation who have done both politics and law. There are most sort of stick to one or the other. So most of the people who I worked with in politics have gone on into public affairs, which is essentially lobbying, and then most of the people who I know in lawyers are still lawyers. So, but there are obviously transferable skills. Just knowing how to respond to people. If you're working in a parliamentary office, you're going to what is the role you're likely to get?
So I'm from Singapore, so they kind of have a foreign services role where you kind of work in embassies for Singapore.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's slightly different to working in pure politics, because the diplomatic service has to be much more constrained. The ambassadors obviously can't say what they want. They have to work within what the government tells them to say. So that is probably more similar to working within a more sort of rigid legal framework. Whereas obviously if you're working for a politician, they're paid to say what they think within the structure of the party that they're a member of. But you definitely get some good experience working in a foreign services role. And then, it also, I suppose, opens the door to government legal service type roles, public law roles, anything like that. So like in the same way I sort of was able to use the to leverage the parliamentary agency bit. That was quite useful. You would be able to leverage your experience into a law firm or into the government. So I definitely do it, and don't. There's no real rush either. I don't think don't think you need to get into law as soon as possible. Again, I think there is a tendency to compare yourself to what your peers are doing potentially, and think, oh, okay, this person's going off to be a lawyer now, so I need to keep up with them. And that's rubbish, because you go your own way, and you'll figure out when you get to. I turned 35 the other day, and that was a weird shock, because I still consider myself a child in so many ways. But actually, there's so much time. You've got so much time to do what you want. Don't rush it.
All right, yeah, thank you. That's great advice. And then the question that we kind of got from people, and kind of rephrasing it. So with advisory, it's more of a network that brings your clients to lawyers, and this has also been a kind of trend with law firms as well. I remember doing research on A&O, and they have their A&O. I can't remember what it's called. Do you think this would be something that law firms will move towards, and so it will kind of become a competitive environment in the next few years?
Yeah, so there are big networks, big international networks already. So if you wanted to go to A&O, or even regional firms in the UK will have an international network. So this is very much the step sort of below that, if you like, in terms of the pitch. So people advisedly wouldn't be doing an IPO. They'd be helping on the sort of smaller commercial and corporate matters, and buying a house, that sort of thing, rather than the bigger ticket items that the larger firms can take care of. But the whole principle behind advisory is that there is a huge market of people, and I think a growing market, and I think following coronavirus, it will grow even further. A market of individuals and businesses who see the real value in living somewhere, working somewhere, trading somewhere that they want to be, rather than being stuck in one particular country or region. So why be stuck in a flat in London when you can be owning a house in Portugal? And Portugal is obviously the classic one because of the visa that they have there. But why do we live our lives in this particular way? And I think the pandemic and the restrictions imposed because of it have forced people to reevaluate a bit more. But also when it comes to the big challenges that the world is going to face in the next few years, and it's already facing, it requires an international effort, and not just an international effort by really big organizations, but by everyone. So I'm thinking of classically climate change, all the ecological problems that flow from that. That is going to require a huge communal effort, and whether or not advisory has a particular role in that, I don't know, but I think there is a general trend towards the fact that we are all more international, and at the moment the only people that can get good international advice are people who can afford to pay huge fees for, frankly, not very much. They're not getting good value from the bigger firms who connect to other big firms, and then you're just replicating everything when you don't need to. There are great firms that could do the same things in a much better way for a fraction of the price. So and leveraging technology, which is also obviously the other big element of change, which is coming about, and enabling this change of the way people live and work, and increasingly internationally.
Thank you for the answer. My last kind of question is, from being a lawyer to being an entrepreneur, you have learned a lot of skills prior. I mean, with being a lawyer and being in Parliament as well. But would you encourage anyone who kind of is looking to become an entrepreneur to take the leap forward? Do you think this is a good time, or do you think, what kind of skills should they develop before trying to leap into entrepreneurship?
I don't know. It's really tough. I don't even know that I've made the right decision, right? Because I haven't succeeded yet. So I mean, obviously, it's useful to have to have some savings so that you can fall back on that. It's useful to have a set of skills that you can fall back on if the entrepreneurial thing doesn't work. Some people can do the entrepreneurial thing alongside an existing career path, although I'd say that's quite difficult if you're a lawyer to do it at the same time, because law is very all-consuming. So would you do it alongside? I think for other jobs, yeah, you could. If you had a 9-to-5 job, you could be an entrepreneur in the evenings and then see whether it works. And if it does work, then you can do something else. You can pursue that business idea. Should I have become an entrepreneur earlier? I don't know. I don't know that would have been the right time. What I would recommend though is reading a lot and talking to as many people as possible about how business works and what being an entrepreneur means. So there are loads of good reading lists out there, but the Lean Startup is the classic one for if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, and that's probably useful even if you're not thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and you want to become a lawyer, because then you have more of the language of how businesses work, although caution to that approach, because lots of lawyers will have no idea what you're talking about because they don't themselves have this experience. So I'd recommend there are lots of online courses as well, Coursera and edX and various others, that there's so much to learn, and it's all free, that you might as well take advantage of it. And in doing those things, you may have ideas directly, or you may learn you may think about what it is would be the next best step for you to take. You're never going to be able to plan everything A to B to C to D, and for that to work out. It's going to be A to B to B to B to B to B to F, and then it's not unexpected, and you're going to look back and maybe you can string together some kind of story that it was all planned, but it never is. So I would, if you feel the urge to do something, to try something, then why not? But keep your options open. Try and learn from as many people as you can to test whether that's a good idea or not. Try not to spend too much money before you've got a customer or two, because don't build something that no one wants. That's the worst thing you can do, because you can spend 10 grand and end up with just having spent 10 grand and have no one interested in it. So that's always the biggest risk.
Yeah. And I think when you reminded me of something, Rob, when he said about going from B to B to B. In the words of Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, he said you can't connect the dots looking forwards. You can only connect the dots looking backwards.
Right. Okay. Yeah. He said it more eloquently than me. Yeah.
No. Actually, the way you put it, the way you said it was actually better. I think it was more relatable. Whereas when he says it, I think it's more like he's high in the sky, it's a billionaire or whatever. But now, on that note, actually, Robert, unfortunately, we have to close the event. We could be talking for hours, I'm sure, but I'm really thrilled to have you on this event. And Azar, thank you so much for co-organizing it, and James as well, thank you so much. And yeah, any final thoughts, any final sentence or whatever, anything you want to share with the audience?
I guess if any of you want to get in touch to ask for any advice, just let me know. Happy to share any wisdom I may or may not have. It's nice to help other people who were in a position that I was in when I was in that place. So yeah, get in touch.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Robert, and I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just a last minute plug from The Legal Mile. We have launched our website, so it's www.thelegalmileglobal.com. And we can find more resources there as well. And this recording will be up on the website. So I look forward to uploading it over the weekend, I guess.
Thanks for organizing this. It's a good event.
Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you so much, Raja.
Cheers, everyone.
Take care.